The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, maybe good evening. Hope everyone's doing well today. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you could just let us know if you can hear us and see us okay. Hi, Jay. Hi, Isaac. Hi, CR. Awesome. Thanks, Greg. Thanks so much for joining us today for a new demystifying series on, is it trashing it up and making things dirty, guys?
Making it looks terrible.
Making it look terrible. Yes, this is the theme, and it's such a great theme inside of Red Giant Universe. I'm Nick, and I will be doing some presenting today. So hopefully some of you have seen me in other webinars, but I am a Maxon Red Giant certified trainer, and I am surrounded by the best talent in the world here today. Joining me first off is Max. Hi, Max. How's it going?
Hi everyone. I'm doing great. How about you, Nick?
I'm doing good. It's great
Yeah,
to be
it's
at
been a long time since we are in the same webinar. I'm really happy to be here
Yes,
today.
I'm really happy to be here. I think it was a universe webinar we were here on the last time too. So
Exactly. Yeah.
it's it's great
Last
to be
year.
back.
It's great to be
Yes.
back.
And you're right now doing like a color series, right? A hands-on color
Oh
series. If
yeah,
you're
on that note, yeah, I'm hosting a 6 series of introductions to color grading, which run from August until September. So in the first webinar, we talked about the introductions, like the very fundamentals things, how to push this button, what this button does, all the basic. And then in the second webinars, we were talking about um, more in the file acquisitions department, shooting what type of file format and everything. And then the third, it was like really interesting because it was all about lighting and how we apply those lighting knowledge that we learned from photographers and cinematographers when we are grading. And fourth week, it was about all different type of workflows. So we covered like 2 different workflows. And last week we were talking about just a casual discussions how our guest speakers enters the industry. So we had like 3 colorists joining us last week, and it was really great. If you missed that, you feel free to check that in the YouTube channel. And next
yes.
week will be the last one, and it will be
Oh
just
wow.
it will be no, this is going to be this week. Yeah, this week, this Thursday.
Yes, September
It's
9th, this Thursday. Okay.
exactly. It's just
And
all about creating looks.
yeah, and for any other events besides just the color correction one, you guys, so you can check out the whole hands-on series on YouTube, like Max was mentioning. But there are a ton of other events going on. The 3D Motion Show next week, and in regards to the YouTube page, the Maxon um, Red Giant training channel, which I have up here, the training team. I'll actually copy this link because that is where today's webinar is going to be as well at the end of it. And with that said about today's webinar, the other guest that we have today is Dr. Sassy, and he is a Maxon Master Certified Trainer, not to mention really the architect behind this incredible journey that we're about to go on. And before I give the full introduction, I wanted to mention that he's supplied quite a bit of files for everyone to look over, if I'm correct. And I'm going to paste in a second the Dropbox where you can grab some storyboards, you can grab some exercise files, some practice files for After Effects, not to mention just see a beautiful and wonderfully constructed mind map of potentially how to go thinking about universe tools in a completely different way. So thank you so much for hopping on board, Sassy.
You're welcome. And thanks for having me here. And a big shout out to Simon, of course, because he was the producer, idea, creator, whatever. He asked me to do this. And while we were talking about, we had the idea, it is pretty much like a little studio. He's the producer, he gives me something to do, so I have to direct this stuff to get all the talented people like you and Max and Harry and Laura on board and make it a package that has benefit for everyone who's watching, and I hope it is so. Please keep always in mind, the more you know, the harder it is to give you anything more on top of that. So when it's boring to you, feel great because you know already a lot. And if everything is new to you, wonderful. That's exactly where we have our most fun with. So, and big shout out again to Simon to get well soon. He would love to be here, but I hope next week we will see his nice face again. And yeah,
Yes.
thanks.
Awesome.
He was working hard as well.
And I'm really excited to be a part of this series, and I will supply in the chat very momentarily the Dropbox link where everyone can download these files. And just one other bit of housekeeping, just like every other month, it is free t-shirt month again in September. So I'm going to post that link right now to the Maxon merchandise store, as well as the code, which happens to be terrible09. So all caps terrible09. Just wait a second, I will paste all of this information into the chat so that you guys have it. But head to that Maxon merch store, buy free. You do have to pay for shipping, so that's the only catch, but I think it's only $4. And yeah, without further ado, I think it's time for us to start this terrible trading series. Sorry.
Certification page.
Ah, yes.
Sorry.
And then the last piece of information is, don't forget that on the, if we actually head to maxon.net, we can do this together. You can get a certification in any of your favorite applications. So I did not have up this link. So this is something I'm going to post at the very end of the conversation here. But Sassy, do you want to take me through this? Where would I find it?
Learn.
I think all the link that you mentioned today is also provided kindly by Simon in the handout sections. There's a PDF download.
Perfect.
So you just open the PDF and you can follow the links to the merchandise store and all the codes and everything. And the link was maxon.net/certifications.
Yes. So I just pasted that in the chat, and it's also in the PDF. Thanks for that, Max. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And yeah, without further ado, I want to hand the stage over to Sassy. So let me do that. And let's get started with making it terrible.
Let's make it terrible.
So can you see my screen and the mind map?
Yes, I can.
And I have to make it maybe a little bit.
I see it now. Yes.
Okay. So first of all, when I first saw that universe is live, I don't know how many years ago that was, 8 years, or I don't know exactly anymore. I was overwhelmed, to be honest. And I said, what are they doing? It's material over material, and I lost completely track. And of course, in the moment you get an idea how to use it, it becomes just groups, and these groups become then lots of options. But you as an artist want to have, of course, security in it. You want to know what you're doing instead of feeling overwhelmed. And that is maybe one of the main aspects that we try to solve in our 4-part series, that we can give you the certainty that you say, hey, I want to do this, and I have this problem, and I want to solve it with maybe universe even. And in my head, the work title for the series was always Mess It Up. I was corrected. It's Make It Look Terrible. And I hope we do not mess it up today, at least not for my part. And then the first part, I have little cards here so I don't mess it up. Telling a story with unique visual language. This is our main target here, of course, to say when you have a bunch of clips and you want to combine them to something unique and you want to have continuity in it, so it looks like it was all shot for one purpose, then Universe will help you in a great way. The studio idea I have already introduced, and in this way we have each time a major or lead designer artist as guest. Today Nick is the lead here, and as I said, Simon is pretty much the studio owner, the producer. I will have the head of the director on, and let me explain a little bit what I think about to be a director. It's not my favorite job because I have to tell other people what to do, and I think there's the most danger always inside of the whole teamwork pipeline. And I know it's not that simple, but simplified, we have 3 different ways to think about a director. One that is micromanaging everything, and he wants to have everyone done what he wants to do or she wants to do, and it gives a claustrophobic feeling to everyone. And then you are a director who has a very specific idea about things, and you find people who can do this, and then you tell them what to do, and you talk as long to them as you get your result. That means you never reach a level that is above you. And that's maybe okay, it's maybe safe and sound, but it's not wonderful. And the approach that I try to do here is I give my idea, and after that, I let them all run free. And there's a little danger inside of that. But when you want to have synergy in a team, you explain your ideas and you explain it again because everyone is in kind of private stress. If he moves, the dog is ill or whatever. And so you have to explain it maybe 3 times before it is understood in the way you want to have it. And then they create their own thing on it. And the only thing that the director has to do is twofold. First, find that we all work on the same movie, and the main work for a director is to direct the audience, not the people inside of the team. That's nice, but they are professionals. You don't have to direct them so much, but you want to have a product that the audience understands. And now my mouse is completely dry already. Sorry about that. So that was the studio. Let's go to the beef of it. What we want to do today is, of course, to explain what is the mind map here. And we have on the lower left side the layers of information, which I think is one of the most important parts to understand. What I have in mind of that, when I studied film and all of that stuff, I dissected things. And from my point of view, the most expensive space in movie making, or if you make just a 30-second advertisement, even there, it's even more expensive. The space where you create the canvas is 120 minutes or 30 seconds. And to get really your product out, that means the information that push the story forward, you have to know on which layer you get the best bang for your money. And then all the other layers follow and support the story. That means when set design, film architecture is the main driving force to give you an idea where you are and which time and if the building is luxury or poor, then you have already a main driving force in it. And then everything else inside of that work will support your work. If you use everything at the same time, nothing really stands out, and you as an audience have to look, what is finally going on here? I don't know anymore, and I'm bored, and I channel hop and I'm gone. So find out what is the leading layer in a movie, then work on that, and everything else will fall into place. That's the short version of it. The mind map here. I try to give you an idea where I see potential for everything that is in Red Giant's universe. All the plugins that are created have a purpose, have a power, have a target maybe even. And we can go with the center point, that is of course the whole package, and then we go to types, transitions, disturbance, contrast to pristine, editing, compositing, post cinematography, and layers of course of information. And later during this webinar, I will give you a paper with 20 pages roughly, where each and every point has at least a paragraph or a few lines more that explains exactly what's going on. But I don't want to overwhelm you right from the start, because first we want to have a little bit fun and pleasure with Nick's material. And that brings me to the next point, my clip. We were in Nelson Ghost Town. That was not the first time, and this time I had my drone with me. And I was a fresh pilot there, this FAA 109 thing that everyone has to do so we can use these footage commercially and get not a fine from the FAA. So I wanted to play with it. We were 2 hours there and I shot this, and I hope it will play through that webinar bottleneck. I hope you can hear the sound even. So I hope that was transmitted in the best way and not stuck and the sound stopped or something like that. Sorry, I can't hear what you hear. I hope the quality was okay. So what we have here is, of course, a wild collection of clips where I had no idea what I'm doing at that moment, because that was 4 years ago. And when Simon came with the idea to mess it up, then I was looking for a little story that resembles what a story could be. So an alien comes in Terminator style to planet Earth, and of course the HUD here, the surveillance camera, tries to find him, and then we confront him, but he explodes and escapes, and we think the story is over, and then ta-ta, he comes back again and is off to Area 51. Maybe a very small, very thin story, but the idea is to have 6 different clips that needs to be merged into something that looks coherent, that has continuity in it, and this is pretty much the idea. What I want you to know and to learn, of course, is when you have 93 different plugins in that universe package, it might look a little bit much to start with, and where to start is exactly the question. And there is, of course, a logic in all of that. When we film, we have stuff in front of the lens. This is the first step. Then we have parts that are created inside the lens, like lens flare, flare, and chromatic aberration, and all these things. Then the camera takes something, and depending on if we have a digital or celluloid or polyester these days material inside, then we get maybe noise or artifacts and something like that. From there, we go to the storage unit, which was maybe a VHS recorder or something different. And that can produce, of course, also a lot of artifacts and stuff that we know. And then we have the transmission, and sometimes the transmission is part of the whole movie as well. When someone watched the TV, the monster comes from the left and distorts the whole picture, and then we get an indicator, wow, there's something going on, and we know already, based on the language, there's a monster around, and based on these disturbances. So that's language in the movie, and we can use it to our advantage to not always show the monster, because then it is worn out before it really gets scary. And so we give little hints, there's something going on, and for that, universe is fantastic to use. So what we want to do is, of course, to see where we apply these effects globally or locally. Like when the alien comes to planet Earth, it's locally. Here in the HUD, it's globally. And then we can do this temporarily. That means we go from one over the next to the next clip, or we go just frame by frame wise. That depends on which contrast we want to have, which continuity we want to have, and so on. And the art and how to build your own language is, of course, our target here, because I think we as artists, we have a very specific view to the society, to the culture, to the products that we produce. And that very specific position is normally expressed in your art. If you copy it from someone else, you take his position or her position in, and that's not really authentic to you anymore. So that you can create a language that expresses exactly what you want, and that you understand how the audience understands it, so you can communicate in a free way, is of course exactly what we want. So maybe a short rundown. We talked about the whole thing. We created a little script. We found a story. I researched my archive, created 6 little scenes. It was all done in Cinema 4D, even the motion tracking. Then I created a little motion graphic package that is here, the HUD screen, for example, and maybe you get bored already about it, so I move it a little bit to a different place. And from there, I went to Mixamo, and I took this little guy here, but I found blue was not really the color, and so I thought we go with Max about color and what color means and how we manage to get the whole thing into a meaningful way, other than just to dump color on it. And from there, I animated the whole alien, and then it goes, yeah. I created the title, rendered the passes, went to After Effects with the universe parts, then I have redone the whole thing because I thought it could be better. Edit the clips, and edit the clips is exactly this point where I went here right now. When you go here to this point on the left upper corner, you will see that the last frame of this one has the most light pretty much on that area where we cut through. So that's my style of editing. Maybe you have a different one, as every artist should have their own or his own language. And from my point of view, where the eyes are, when I want to have a nearly invisible cut, even with completely different footage, then I go where the eye were before, and then I get something seamlessly. So when I go now here, where he goes out of the scene, then in the next picture, he will arrive pretty much in a similar space again. And that gives a continuity in watching the movie all by himself. So we will talk maybe later about what I have used, but now we have seen the clip, and Nick has, I guess from our talk yesterday, a complete different idea how to do this. And that's fantastic, because then you get two versions to see, and we can discuss which one is maybe more effective, better, more to your taste. And it's all good. I'm really, really curious what Nick has done, and I give the screen back to Nick. Let's see there. Hello.
That's really nice to put it, Dr. Sasi. I never know that you can categorize universe effect, like how you approach the scene when you're shooting. That's a really great way to look at it. I mean, well, thank you for inspiring that. I mean,
And thanks for pointing that out, because I forgot one point. Here in the HUD, I have changed exactly that, where I thought if I put the alien into that analog effect, it melts and it becomes one and it stands not out. So I changed it, messing it up or make it look terrible. In this case, I wanted to have the alien in front of that CRT screen, but between the hexagon grid that spots the little guy. So that's the weird part where it looks like, where is he finally? And yeah, in the moment you break your own rules, you get maybe fantastic results even there. And yes, rules are maybe just to be conditioned, and you want as an artist to decondition people. So don't listen to rule, make your own rules, and if the audience understands the rule, then you can break them. So that's all I have to say.
really great.
Thank you.
I really liked your breakdown of universe and seeing it from that mind map perspective, because it is such a large package of effects, and it's easy to get overwhelmed by the amount that's available to you, or in some ways even declassify universe as only a certain amount of effects. I found, like, when going to AE scripts, one thing about that, when you purchase a plugin, it's very compartmentalized. So an effect will do one thing in specifically, but with universe, I mean, it is a universe. It's a universe of effects that are useful for video editors and motion graphic designers. And it's like your overall collection of effects that you can use also in a ton of different applications. So it's not just After Effects or Premiere. Max, you can use this in DaVinci Resolve. I could share this with an editor in Final Cut. So
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you as well to kind of break it down and see effects in a very different way. I think is really, really helpful. And I love this perspective of, now it's usually when presenting universe, you would go through, let's say, one or two shots to show some of the capabilities, but not work within the framework of a story. And I think, Max, you can also contest to this. From a color correction standpoint, one of the hardest things to do is unify shots together to make it feel like it is seamless, like matching
that's
color.
the real challenge, exactly.
Right? So
exactly.
And the same thing here. It's like, it's not just on a color correction perspective, it's also on a motion graphic perspective. It's like, how do you unify these shots together? How do you make them all feel like they're in the same universe? In the same universe. I'm trying to watch my language here. Or this alien world that you've created, Sassy.
Master of the universe, of course, right?
Yeah. And in thinking about this, before I go over to my screen, I was trying to come from a motion graphic perspective, but it was also hard to not think about color, in this environment that you've created. So, you had referenced in our discussions the Terminator 2 film, and we can kind of see some of that influence from the ball of energy. Another film, usually when I'll go about the inspiration angle, I'll try to find films or a similar line that's there in the narrative, and potentially borrow or see how people went about introducing certain characters. So we have Terminator and how they arrived, and then I also actually referenced a movie called Ant-Man 2 yesterday, which I'll discuss some of the effects. But there's the antagonist of the film. She's not an alien, but is presented as an alien when we first see her, and she phases. So there's this, I drew this similarity with her with the first shot where you have an alien as the hollow matrix, but I was like, oh, you know what? Through some like chromatic aberration, you could do a separation like there too. So I'll try to discuss some of the effects or different things that I experimented with. But before I do that, when I looked at the shots, there were 6 in total. I tried to find an anchor. I think it's similar in color correction too, where let's say if everything was shot in one place, you're trying to find something that's representative or as most representative of the overall scene.
Exactly,
Sometimes,
the hero shot.
yeah, and sometimes it's not the establishing shot, but sometimes it is. And to me, Sassy, it was the shot where the alien arrives. That is the hero shot. We're building anticipation for where he arrives in this ball of energy, and then he takes off. So I started experimenting with an overall look on this scene and then tried to transfer some of that over to the other shots. That was how I went about it. That was my anchor shot. So with that said, the anchor shot, I know I'm not sharing my screen yet, but this would be a time to do so. Does everyone see my screen okay now?
Not yet. Yes.
How
now.
about now? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So this is the anchor scene that I was talking about, and this is the raw clip, but it's essentially from when we take off from the location that you presented, Sassy, here, and we lead the people's lines based on electricity to where the person is going to arrive. We then cut to that next shot. So let me head back here to the clean version of it.
So you stayed in After Effects and not
Say again?
Premiere.
Yeah, this was a bit of a struggle, I think, in terms of experimenting and keyframing with effects, because this is so timing driven. I did think that After Effects was a good place to start with the experimenting of the look. However, when it comes down to after you have that look established and you've then copied and pasted it over to the other clips, like a base look, and then you build each of the other elements, I would then eventually send these over to Premiere and then cut and do the sound timing there. That is how I would think about the process. But it like you could essentially do both. But I overall decided on After Effects for 2 reasons. One is the ease of keyframing there compared to Premiere Pro, and 2, adding expressions. There was a lot that you could do in terms of just adding simple wiggle values to chromatic aberration and so forth. That experimenting there was a lot of fun. So for those animation, I stick to After Effects. And if you're brand new to Universe, specifically in the Adobe products, we can go to the window once it's installed, go under extensions, and have the Red Giant Universe dashboard populate.
And that's the same in Premiere, right?
It's the same in Premiere, yeah. So you don't have this inside of Resolve or Final Cut or any of the other applications. No. However, you do have the ability from each of your effects to choose a preset. So once you apply a preset to a clip, you can click that button and then it's going to load up a preset gallery, so to speak. So Sassy, I was first of all curious. There were 2 things that I thought could bring the overall scenes together. And one is that when the alien appears or is about to appear in anticipation, there's almost a fluctuation going on in the overall scene. And to me, that connection was chromatic aberration, right? Where you have that along the sides of the edges of the frame, not to mention maybe even a little bit in the frame. The other part to it was the energy or the ball of light in the shot. But I thought that just for sake of his arrival or keying that up was going about inventing this energy first. So I was curious, Sassy, just to go back to my question, what did you use for the energy ball when the character arrived?
That was pretty simple. I used the ramp to make a little spherical gradient, and then I put plasma, universe plasma on it, multiplied it, and that was pretty much all.
You said the plasma effect. I've actually not used that too much.
Turbulence. It's in turbulence. It's a sub part. You were just there, generators.
Oh, it's in the Oh, it's in. Is it in the? Oh, the turbulence noise.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Yeah, so you experimented with a native gradient After Effects effect for the sphere, and then mixed that with the generator. And one thing that I thought, and was for the ball of energy, was to actually use no light factory. So this combined with a glow and potentially the electricity effect that you saw in the shot that Sassy was showing that leads you to the next shot, I thought these combined effects could sort of combine the two shots together and even be continued into other shots within the piece.
And
so
John Knoll's light lens flare makes totally sense there, because it's a lot of light in front of the lens. And yeah, maybe I'm too old school. I try to hold my lens clean. No lens flare, no flare. And
yeah.
I think in the last 10 years, we have seen exactly the opposite. Everything is glowing and flaring. And I have started to work with that, of course. But there's always people will think less of me when I do this. But in motion graphics, it's a must do. I think it's so much emotion inside of that light. And here it makes even physically sense. You have a spark and you get all these reflections between the lenses.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that there's something to be said about overdoing lens flares, like you said, Sassy, where even J.J. Abrams has admitted that he went overboard on Star Trek after seeing a couple of YouTube videos where they have like a 20-minute video just on the lens flares. I used primarily as transitions between each of the shots and for stylistic purposes. But a lot of times, just while not in universe, we'll get to that, there's a full version of No Light Factory where you can design lens flares, and there you could just choose a lens flare preset, get rid of most of its components, and then just from it have a ball of glowing light, and then save that for future use. So I like the fact of potentially taking an existing preset and then breaking it down, but for at least sort of visualizing what this light might look like, No Light Factory Easy does a great job. And with all universe plugins, so when you've loaded the dashboard, the idea is that you want to have your clip selected in your timeline wherever you're going to apply it. In this case, I don't have a mask for the alien, but that's okay. There's still a way of getting our eye to go towards this character. And I'm just going to show that I've headed to the stylized category, and I'm going to single click the No Light Factory effect.
Yeah, and
here we can.
Okay. May I say something about John Knoll's Light Factory?
Yeah.
The wonderful thing of lens flares is that they are dependent on light sources and where the camera is. And in the moment the light source or the camera moves, the lens flare moves, of course, with it. It's not a static effect. And you create so much spatial information inside of the picture. So you give the audience way more information, where they are, how they move. It's so much information just with a little bit like lens flare. As you said a few days ago, we go always overboard when we find something, and when we dial it back to 50%, then we might be where the audience can take it. We are often a little bit worn out. We want to have it strong and whatnot, but that brings also up the idea of the difference between forceful and powerful. The Hulk would be, for example, forceful with a big hammer, and Superman would be powerful. Or if you want to open a door with a sledgehammer, that's forceful. But when you have a key, that's powerful. And we as artists, we want to work powerful. We want to have the most bang for the least amount of buck.
No brute
Yes.
force. Yeah.
No brute force, yes.
But
Um,
yeah,
and so kind of in looking at the shot of the alien's arrival, with this shot selected, at any time you can apply any of these presets.
and
If
you
we
can
were
alter
just,
them. Sorry.
oh yeah, we can alter them somewhat. So this is where Universe provides kind of your quick lens flare look, Sassy, but if you want to go into the full no light factory version, that's where you can alter every single component. But at the end of the day, if you have a subscription to the Red Giant Complete, you have access to both. So this you can in Universe use for quick some pre-visualization, even keyframe some components, and then upgrade this inside of the full version of No Light Factory.
I just want to add something onto that. I think the No Light Easy is a really great gateway to No Light Factory, because the full No Light Factory is not available in Resolve. So Universe, however, on the other side, it's available in Resolve. So it's a really great how do you call it, like a peek into the No Light Factory, and it's really great too.
Yeah, and the one that you have chosen now is a typical cinemascope, because you have this stretched line, and you just switched. Normally these strikes come up based on the plates. You have always twice the amount with uneven
that looks
plate
nice.
numbers. Yeah, that's very,
I like it.
super readable.
So
I shut up.
no, this is so I'm just auditioning some different lens flares here, in terms of potential choices. Usually if I would come to this just knowing that it is kind of a science fiction theme, there happens to be a category, inside your presets specifically for action, as well as a few others for natural light, which I use quite a bit, just to not in this, as well as then motion graphics and cinematic, so to speak. So you've got all these categories where you can choose from between stylistic lens flares, and then on the other aspect of it, realistic lens flares.
Okay. Can you move the light source just one time left and right so people can see what it does? See the change inside of the space, and when that is connected to anything in the scene, you will have the feeling you have more information in that empty space.
It is similar to what we covered in a color grading couple of weeks ago, a couple of sessions ago with Diego. I think we how do you call it? We talked about that, as a visual artist, we're working in the 2D medium, whilst we we always want to make it 3D. It doesn't matter if you're even like working in Cinema 4D, your delivery will still in 2D, and the way you how do you call it, finish it matters.
And on the mind map I have some points, and we will go next week over these points where we can change depth perspective with color and all of that.
It really give depth.
Yeah, and we should commit now to one light flare, otherwise we will do this to the end of the show.
No, I was planning on it for sure. And you could play with these for quite a bit of time. And I wanted to show two parameters here just to kind of talk about them, which allow us to sort of play with the energy that's going to be projected before his arrival. So one is the brightness, but the other is the scale of the overall flare. And these two parameters were enough in some ways to then have this light appear. So like right now I've taken down this flare brightness to an entire amount, but a few frames before he arrives is where I want to have that anticipation of the character. So I'm going to just do a rough keyframe here of the brightness.
And in the full version, you could use even the alpha channel for this figure and get light from it.
Oh, wow.
You can do location tracking in this one as well, where you could give it a location layer. And so we could, through different or using various channels, track it to this character as well if we needed to. But with that said, I mean, with the motion that he has here, this wasn't too bad to do, at least with a manual mockup, to move the light location source, because we have it appear, then follow him, and then when he lands, this light source in the script disappears. And it's not until a little bit later where we then choose another flare for him to hop into. So I did a basic rough flare brightness, and then right around when he first arrives, I also did an increase in flare scale. So just before, as an anticipation, and keep in mind, I'm also then going to keyframe this so that the lens flare follows the subject just prior to landing. And then I keyframed down the brightness. Now I wanted to talk about one other added element that I added to the lens flare just before the first few frames, because in the easy version of No Light Factory, the light is static. And I thought that having a little bit of a flicker, which lens flares tend to do depending on how they're going to strike the camera, might be something that's really nice. Just adds a little bit of randomness. So in combination with the flare brightness, I just added a simple wiggle expression inside of After Effects, where I'm right now just going to wiggle this light by a little bit, and then explain how so you can sort of see. Let's add a little bit more of a flicker. The idea here is that the light is flickering 20 times every second by a certain value. And now that I've introduced this, the problem is that it continues, as you can see, Sassy and Max, to flicker, which I don't want it to do. But the great thing, and this is why I chose After Effects in order to experiment with this, is that you can attach those two values to what's called the control, and then have the wiggle be keyframed down. And that's exactly what I did, was to introduce a little bit of wiggle in terms of the light, and then had it go down to a value of 0.
Yeah, and I normally add all these stuff on black solid, so I can just press the T key, go with the opacity down, and have control over it without.
I have a question to you, Nick, for you.
Sure.
In this case, you are using like No Light Factory Easy, and then you add the wiggle expressions when you are saving it as a preset. I wonder if the wiggle expressions is carried as well, or is it just the settings in the?
No, you're just going to get the settings. When you save a preset, you're not going to get the animation. However, there are so many effects within Universe which have sort of random animations, not so much No Light Factory. For that, you'd want to go to the full version of VFX Suite, where there happens to be a blink value built in that you could and that blink value would then essentially save when you save it out as a lens flare preset, if that makes sense.
Okay. May I introduce that we have roughly a little bit over 10 minutes time left?
Sure.
So fast. Oh,
yeah,
man.
I have to push. We want to see more. I want to see your whole solution.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So so let me just go to the actual shot, because I know that we are running out of time, and I wanted to show a few things that were going on. So we were talking about the chromatic aberration a little bit earlier too, Sassy, and how that plays a role. And you can see here just before the alien's arrival that there is a certain amount of chromatic aberration that is pulsating. So in order to get it to pulsate, I added wiggle value expressions to the red, green, and blue channels of the aberration. And you can see there that then as soon as the alien hits the ground, that aberration goes away.
I love that.
Now there's a second element here, which is, and this effect is cool because you introduced this earlier, which is the uni.Electrify effect. And the Universe Electrify effect was added in the last version of Universe, and it actually follows the contours by default of your footage. However, in this case, I have Universe Electrify right after the glow, and because it's after the glow and following its contours, when the light expands, it's keyframed, the electrify effect expands. And then that energy that you introduced in the other shot basically pulses forward before he lands.
I love that. It's
so
source luminance, and there is way more to do with it. And I love your combination. It's, whew, I learned something.
Oh, thanks. And the second part to the story is, do you know how this like lens flare is actually a different color here? And I'm not settled on it, but I just note that it was green when he originally arrived, but I thought that there might be some motivation to play with the color the second time, because it's a different ball of energy now that he pops into. And I just did this on one no light factory layer, and I thought this was so cool, and I've never experimented with before, where I actually keyframed the flare category and the lens preset here. And you'll notice that at one point, it actually switches from the sunny to the a science fiction Helios preset.
Fantastic.
And when this ball of energy happens again, notice how that chromatic aberration, and there's a wiggle behind it, also gets introduced.
It has a little bit like local rolling shutter in it. It's what I love on your idea with the different colors is you introduce not only it's the departure and arrival. You have different colors, and you introduce to the audience a better readability what happens at the moment. When you use it again, you know he will come or he will go. He was maybe invisible and he goes now. You could do that.
It's very subtle, but it's very powerful.
But when you develop a language for a movie, you want to have something that is readable. And you did this, and you expanded on what I have done, which I love. Just to say, we get synergy here. That's great. Sorry.
Yes. No. No. So I thought this was just such a great concept to play with that light, and then the electrify that was introduced. And I have to say one thing about Universe is that when you apply multiple make it look terrible effects, it's very easy to kind of get carried away with how much damage there is. And the more compounded it is, the more that all of these distortion effects almost start to look too much. And I found myself sort of applying these effects, then adding additional make it terrible effects, only to pull back or scale back on effects that I'd previously added. And I think that there's some parallels to your process, Max, where in color correction, you'll start off with like a general maybe
push
color
it to 11 first, exactly.
a series, but you end up pulling it back later on after you've applied a stylistic look. So it was definitely one of those push and pull processes, and this is a great introduction to the surveillance shot. I wanted to talk about this because I added just a few elements to what the frame was, as well as I wanted to find another motivation, because this was a surveillance shot, and I'm like, okay, well, because it's a surveillance and it's a HUD, someone's watching this, and they're looking through some sort of monitor. And call it also just because I wanted to show you guys a new effect that was recently added to Universe, but that it gives a kind of cool look. I applied analog, and analog was added on the last version with Electrify, and it basically takes your footage and makes it look like an analog television. And what's so great about showing this effect is it explains exactly sort of my leeway here, where if you go into the stylized category and you find analog, and I apply something that I think looks great right away, just notice like I can't even make out my footage.
Can you put your screen to 400%?
So I can put it to 400% for sure.
So people can see what happens really there. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, at the pixel level. So this is the preset, and it was very hard to sort of find sort of an analog look to this, but really pull back on the values that were given. So I did a few things, and I'll break down these shots here. But the analog effect number one, I applied it to an adjustment layer, and that adjustment layer is set to a very low opacity value. So that was one way that I sort of pulled back on the analog look, but then at the end have control over how much to dial it back in. Some universe effects have mix values where you can grab onto that mix value and then sort of dial back down. This one did not, so I would have to go to individual categories in order to pull them back, but putting them on an adjustment layer gave a lot of flexibility. Now, the other thing that I had to do in this effect, let me just apply a preset again so you can see it.
May I?
That's the,
yeah, sorry.
So I'll get back to this in one sec. I just wanted to show that there's like a distortion that takes place too with the analog effect. And I didn't want so much to put this in a screen as much as I just wanted the effect like they're watching an analog television. Like we don't quite know.
That was my questions before. Yeah, I was about to ask you, like, how can I remove the screen?
Yeah, so there's two things you want to do. So since this is like a 16:9 project, one max is go to the aspect ratio and make this 16:9. Number two, you're going to get rid of the curvature value in transform. And those two options give you basically a flat screen with all of the distortion that you might have chosen from your preset. And now we're simply looking at dialing down several of these values. But there's a lot of fun here where we can get very specific in our storytelling, like what's the CRT monitors that they use at Area 51, and then dial that specific type of look in there. Yeah. And sorry, Sassy, I knew you had a question. I just wanted to.
No, it wasn't a question, because we have shared the footage and we have now the blue hexagrid. There's also red and green in it. And the idea was, of course, not that I love the blue version or the red or whatever. When you use this footage at home, there, you can see it. I splitted it up so you have on the R, G, or B channel each time the different states. So you can color correct it very easily, or you can put a noise on top of it. You can use it as a mask in After Effects. So the colors are really just like a triple mask here. Just so
gotcha.
So you can do more. Sorry.
No, and that was something that I was going to get to, but I wanted to sort of take this as like I was taking the hexagon, and I just love this idea that there was like a red-green distortion switch when he appears, and I linked an effect called uni.Progresso, right, which is just we can consider it almost like a HUD component right now, and you'll notice that based on how close our alien perpetrator gets to the camera when he's visible, this percentage of Progresso gets more aggressive or almost acts as a warning sign. I wasn't sure about it. If I just show the Progresso layer and just press U, you can see some manual keyframing I did that is specifically timed with his appearance. So it's wiggling just almost like a warning that something is close, but it's not until he appears through this force field that it gets a bit more aggressive in terms of the value. And now percentage is the default, but I wanted to sort of still play with the idea of what number is showing here. And I also did an earlier iteration of this where I placed on screen text. Have you guys used that before in Universe? Which just added basically some filler information on top of the clip, but I found that was too much in terms of what showed.
But can you open the dashboard to see all these HUD elements so people know where to find them? And
yeah, so this is the one that I used, Progresso, and Progresso itself does something very simple, which is a progress bar. The progress bar itself, you have 4 chart types that you can choose from. They are linear bar, arc, pie chart, and linear sequence. And then you can see in that each of these categories, those are the types that you get. Now, once you select a Progresso bar, in this case, there are 2 main areas or settings. There are your overall color and text settings at the top, and then you want to go to the corresponding chart type choice. So linear sequence is where I went. I made this bar thinner and also tried to match its color with the hex grid so that we had a unified kind of pattern of those motion graphic elements. Now I thought about introducing other HUD components, which is a discussion for another week, and it's incredibly powerful, but the alien was the center of the story in this case. I just want to get rid of some of those distortion
Nick,
effects. I think it's the quality.
Nick,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think
Yeah.
it's a perfect timing to ask you. Isaac just asked if there could be some way to change the color of the progress bar to be yellow or orange to red the larger the value gets to the further. I mean, you can see the question as well, right?
animate them.
Yeah, no, I actually I wasn't paying attention to the question,
I'm
so
sorry
I'm really
for
glad that you.
Yep.
Oh, I'm glad that you
Probably he's
had
asking,
mentioned it to me.
He's asking if there's a way to change the
Yeah.
the color of the progress bar, and probably, you know, when it's hitting almost hundreds, then it changed to red or something like that.
On the left.
Yes, and
Yeah. Okay.
I love this because this was something I played with too, Isaac. One was I didn't actually play with the color, but all of the colors are controlled here for your progress bar. And ideally, what you're going to do is then keyframe two colors. One is the foreground fill color, which are going to be the actual progress, and then you have your background fill color, which is the bar itself. And you could keyframe this over time by simply adding those keyframe values, and it's going to then, it's not going to, if you wanted to just do a switch in color, you could do hold keyframes or then have, here we go, let's actually keyframe and show it.
Can you also click on the choose a color map, please?
Yes, there is the choose color map as well, that you can choose from to design your progress bar.
Oh, there's
And
already presets within a presets. Nice.
Yeah. So these are all going to decorate your progress bar as well, which is kind of cool. And then, you know, with this being a collaborative process with Sassy as well as Max, I would probably go about saving this color, right? Because if we're working back and forth, being able to save this as a preset, I would then be able to have Max or Sassy work on it. Sassy showing me potentially some changes that he wanted specifically with the progress bar, but then Max being able to add some more damage in terms of color correction and so forth, but then also access it directly in Resolve. And just one other note about the progress bar, which is kind of cool because we're talking about changing the look. One was the color look that we can change, but the other is if you haven't made your mind up about the progress, I find this to be like the coolest thing about a few different effects in Universe. Notice how right now, guys, I'm switching to an arc segment. Did you guys see that?
Yeah.
So I've lost the positioning, but you see how the percentage kept and all of my keyframes checked?
Nice.
And
right, I don't have to re-keyframe.
And
it's like all kept in sync.
And all of your JavaScript would be kept as well when you connect it to wiggling or whatever.
Yeah. Exactly. Really cool. Yeah, so all of this is kept, the wiggling, it's all transferred over to that. And there's a few different effects like that you can do it to, hacker text included, where you could add some keyframing, and then when you switch to the other text element, it's going to keep that. So you continue working forward.
And you could Command D the Progresso and just move it a little bit down, change the color, and you have another one.
Exactly. Yeah, and we could add a few more elements. And yeah, there was the screen text when I applied it was just acting up because of the amount of effects, but there was something nice and subtle about having, if you guys haven't seen this in the text category, this is just for a HUD element. I applied, there's one here called astronomical image transport, which just seemed to sound about right. And just having this as a preset, as an overlay over your footage was kind of cool, but it didn't feel like a supporting element, so I had removed it from the shot. The only other thing to talk about here with when the alien arrived, when you triggered the red, green, blue separation, I thought that this is also the perfect moment. And while it's a little too subtle on this shot, where I have a chromatic aberration effect, which I keyframe to reveal, here you can see this, and switch the screen whenever our character comes up. There was one other thing I did with the alien, and Sassy had provided some masks from Cinema 4D of the character. And I just wanted to mention that I took the mask and used it as a Luma mat inside of After Effects. Now, one thing I thought that would be interesting when he was moving, right, or phasing at the beginning and potentially on the camera where we can't quite make him out, was just a native After Effects effect called Echo. And what Echo will do is allow you to make a series of copies of your image, and then based on a decay, as well as a number of echoes. Just to see this more clearly, let me increase that. Do you guys see that?
Yeah, like in burnt in After Effects, sorry, the pun on the screen of the. You remember the
Yes.
old video cameras when you went through a light and you had these worm going through the picture?
Yes, I totally do. I remember that. Yeah. So I
That's
thought it
cool.
would
Yeah.
be fun to play with the fact that here with a very an echo where the number of seconds isn't that far apart, like it's a very small number. And with a very small decay, you get sort of the remnants of our character. Let me just undo to show this better.
And what it would do to the story means you want to have the mystery about the alien, and the less you understand what's going on and how he works and all of that, the more confusion you have, the more you mess up your brain with all these pictures, the more mystery he has, or she, I don't know, or Daya, or whatever. It's aliens. I have no idea about them.
You get this mystery because of the echo. You're just not exactly sure, and then as well as like that introduction of the hollow matrix where we weren't, like, it appeared like he was phasing. I started playing around with the RGB separation here, where this is another effect that's comparable to chromatic aberration, but it had just more controllable values. And I keyframed with a wiggle expression the radius, which is to some degree, to a very subtle amount, which then separates the character, and was hoping to then trigger it every single time that we see him.
Yeah. And I think
Now,
we are already over time.
we are over time, and it's
Oh,
just
man.
there's so many effects to show. The only other thing that I wanted to mention about Electrify, because we saw it here, and Sassy, that Electrify is going to basically create some beautiful electricity around the contours of your image by default. And the only thing I wanted to mention is that it happens to have an evolution offset value. And this is perfect in the situation where you can have this offset be in the exact place where you want it to on the last frame of this to draw the user's eye.
Yeah.
The other part of this was just the matte settings, where I actually switched between two different sets, because image contours is going to go more around the edges of the buildings. But if you wanted to have a generation of electricity around the entire frame, fractal noise seemed to do a better job. So I actually switched between those a few times.
Yeah.
And that 104, time flies when you're having fun.
And what you just said, I hope we can go deeper with Harry into it, because he has a deep knowledge in it. He has also created a whole tutorial about it. And when you think all these values in terms of gray values, it progressively goes through that gray value, which means also we can use every information that we can get from Cinema 4D, like position map, depth map, and so on, and use it to produce these kind of styles. And I hope in part 3 we can talk about this. In part 2, Max will give us the insight to everything color. And in part 4, just to make everyone greedy to stay tuned, I hope we can.
So if you are interested to talk to see about the coloring process, stay tuned next week. We'll do it together from scratch.
Exactly.
We'll discuss it here.
Yeah. And in part 4 with Laura Porat, who does all the presets, or 60 presets. I hope we can have a discussion how to make an animated mood board instead of the statics that we always see, that we can see the value of presets in terms of brainstorming, and that it is a wonderful source when we need to pitch everything. And we put this on the end, which is normally on the start when we want to pitch, but we need to understand the whole process of doing this in the first place. So it's on the end, but it closes the circle. That's all I have to say for today. I thought it was a wonderful presentation from both of you.
Well, Nick, thank you very much for showing us this amazing tips. I mean, I never know about that. Today I learned.
It's great. Well, I can't wait to see your stuff next week. And Sassy, thanks so much for giving us a great narrative to sort of dive into and discuss in these sessions. It's you've spent it's amazing to see the work that you've spent on this, and I think that offering this stuff as well for free to the audience, you know, like to have those storyboards, which you should totally check out with the Dropbox and the PDF that we sent.
Exactly.
It's a lot of fun.
Play around, guys. Yeah. Play around with it. Make it look terrible.
We love our artists, clients, or whatever you want, or whatever term you want to use. But it's really to see over the years in the university, to see people growing, what they are doing with the little tidbits that we give them, and then bang, there are wonderful artists with a huge portfolio on the end. And I hope the footage can be used to create a demo reel if you are just starting out. That stuff is not for sale. It's free to use, and knock yourself out. Show us what you do. We would love to see it.
So cool.
So thanks, everyone. We have 7 minutes over.
Thank you, everybody.
That's not too bad. That's actually we did actually a really good job. 7 minutes is not bad by any means. Yeah. And we'll see everybody. Awesome.
Okay. So who does the outro? Nick?
I think yes. So let me just as a reminder, let me just pull up my screen here. This should be live very shortly on the YouTube page. So I'm just going to pull up the links. Of course. How is my screen doing?
Fine.
Good?
Readable?
Yeah, so we've got our Maxon events here on this page. And don't forget, next week, we've got Making It Look Terrible Part 2. And then Max, we have next week, this week, or a double dose of you on Thursday with the last color grading session.
Can bear that. And it will be 2 hours. Oh, man.
And I just look at Part 2 has a different picture. Part 3 should have a different picture. Part 4 should have a different picture. Okay, someone messed up. But anyway, if that changed, don't be alarmed. It's the same.
Yes. Yeah, no, I remember seeing those different thumbnails as well for each of the shows, Sassy.
Yeah.
So we have that next Monday. Don't forget the PDF link in the files that you guys can all check out that will have a link to the free t-shirts, Terrible09 being the code. And we will have this episode up on the YouTube page within a few hours after this episode finishes rendering to the cloud, that is.
Okay, and
awesome.
Everyone here in the States, happy Labor Day. And thanks worldwide to everyone who's watching and participating from Germany, from Canada, and here from LA. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Until next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you soon.
See you soon.